So what a lot of people don't really understand about like clinical depression and just like really bad depression in general, is basically people ask why would somebody kill themselves? What is suicide? Why does suicide happen? Because a lot of people, and people who are depressed themselves, like again, I have depression. I've had it my whole life, but especially bad in my teenage years. Um, I can say right now, I have no idea why I would kill myself. I mean, I have an idea, of course. I'm going to go into it, but what you know what I mean? Like in this moment right now, it seems like preposterous, fucking ridiculous to do it. But you kind of have to understand that you can't really like logic it out, at least as easily as you think. You know, people aren't really thinking the same way that I do now or you do. If hypothetical person who doesn't have depression. And I think a good example of it I actually want to use is my favorite singer of all time of my favorite band, Chester Bennington of the band Linkin Park. He committed suicide at the age of 41 in 2017. And now they were actually Linkin Park was to they were going to head out on a tour the week afterwards. But before that, he just drank some alcohol right before, and then he hanged himself randomly. A lot of people were like, "What the fuck?" Like they just like he wasn't like at his worst moment. Like he had plenty of issues, even sexual assault, drug addiction as a teenager and stuff like that. He had lots of problems, and a lot of Linkin Park songs are written about his problems. But it just seemed almost like at that point in his life, he had it all, right? He had Linkin Park. They were still a massive band selling out stadiums. He had a wife and kids. He had like all this shit going for him. Why would he just suddenly do it one morning for seemingly no reason and seemingly out of nowhere? And I think that, a lot of people need to understand that like with depression and stuff like that, it really doesn't matter what you have, at least at some points. It just kind of makes you feel like you have nothing, no matter how much you actually have. It's not logical. You can't like rationalize it when you're not in that state. You have to have been there or be there yourself right now to really understand. I'm sure, in the moment, he might not have realized how much he had. You could do maybe from the outside. I mean, yeah, he's the lead singer of one of the biggest rock bands in the world. But like, in that moment, you could feel like that just doesn't mean as much as it actually does. Or, like, you can forget about all that almost. Maybe not forget about it, but just like not be able to see its value and just still feel like you're still alone and still, like somehow like, a net negative to everybody around you. And I kind of felt that too, like in my worst like suicidal moments. I mean, a lot of it was basically just stuff that I, now know was just made up. Like it wasn't stuff that was true. It wasn't stuff I was rationally coming to the conclusions. Like I would just assume things and I would just see them as true because they just like that was just what it does. That's what how depression is. You just kind of have like this endless cycle of just like thoughts about yourself or thoughts about what other people think of you or what you give to them, and you just kind of like come to conclusions about all those things that may not actually have any basis at all. But in those moments, you totally believed them. I totally bought into everything I was thinking. Even, I mean, I would maybe sometimes have moments where I was like, I don't know, but most of the time I was like, I totally fucking buy into this. And I mean, even now, as I'm saying this, there are still moments I have where I'm kind of like that. Although now I'm usually at least able to recognize that they're happening. But I still sometimes fall into that spiral, even if I'm fully aware that it's happening. It's very terrifying. It's not rational. When you're in that state, you're not yourself. You're not rational. You're not logical. You're not thinking this through like you probably normally would. And those are the moments where you can pull out the rope or the belt or the gun. Because those moments you forget about all the things that you would want to stay around for. Or if you do remember them, you think that they'd be better off if you didn't. If you pulled the trigger, they'd be better off. Your kids would love it if you pulled the trigger. It sounds ridiculous. That sounds terrible. Like that sounds awful, right? It would be better for the kids if I shot myself in the head. But like that's what it is. It sounds awful because it's fucking awful. And like that that's the point that some people are at. And Um, I think that a lot of people don't really want to understand that, like, it can just happen. You know, when somebody's fighting that battle, they can just have a day where they feel like that and they do it, no matter what might be happening around them. And with Chester Bennington, I think I find his example mostly interesting because people try to rationalize it all the time. Some people try to say, "Oh, it's because their last album, One More Light, was getting bad reviews by critics were giving it bad reviews. There was some fan base backlash with Linkin Park fans who didn't like the new sound, right? And that maybe Chester was so upset about that that's why he did it, or maybe he was, Chris Cornell, the lead singer of Soundgarden, killed himself a couple months before, and they were good friends. Maybe he did it just because of that or whatever." But I think the truth is that we don't actually know. And it's kind of scary and kind of like difficult to accept, but we don't actually know for sure why he did it. And I mean, the truth is that we'll never know. And it's possible that it wasn't something we could have known at all or seen coming. I mean, a lot of people want to believe that because they want to believe that we could have done something about it. At least beyond just giving him support or encouragement, that there's something we could have prevented or stopped or not done, right? Maybe if those critics would have shut the fuck up about the album, right? But I just don't think that's the case. Again, there's no evidence that, like, he was like super depressed about the album or something, or like this. Maybe he like bitched on Twitter about it or something, but like no evidence. Nobody's ever come out saying, "Oh, the days before he was very clearly upset about this or that." The day before he was with his family, and they had like pictures of him being like all like normal. We don't know. We can't know, and there may not have been a reason at all. And I mean, a lot of people can't accept that because it makes no sense to them. But that's why I wanted to kind of go into the mindset of being depressed. It doesn't really matter what's happening around you. It doesn't really matter if, like, you're actually doing really well. It doesn't matter if you're like really successful, or even like, your friends love you so much that, it couldn't be, you could never get that impression. You somehow do anyways. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's never, and people gotta stop assuming that it has to matter, or it has to be logical or rational. It's not, and it never will be. And there will be times where people will hang themselves, shoot themselves in the head, slit their wrists, and you won't know why. Beyond knowing that they had depression or they had some problem. But you won't be able to point to an event that pushed them to do it, or some problem in their life with their family or something like that pushed them to do it. Sometimes you can. That I'm not saying that there aren't times where you can know that. In fact, not all suicidal people or people who commit suicide, not all people who commit suicide are clinically depressed or like, mentally ill even. They can do it because of circumstance. That does happen. But in a case like Chester Bennington of Linkin Park, he had pretty good circumstances. And, his life was going pretty well, it seems like. I mean, his album got some bad critical reviews, and it was top one on the Billboard 200 when it released. And there were a lot of fans that did like it, and people were attending their shows. And, like, they had this tour in a week. On the day he died, it was a week away from a tour of North America. Yet he still died. He still died. And, I mean, it's like, nobody wants to believe that, but the truth is that I don't think anybody could have done anything. I think everybody did all they could. And that's just what happens with those problems sometimes. And I've seen this, again, a lot of people assume, oh, maybe the friends didn't support them enough. The friends themselves think that. The friends themselves think that I should have done more or I should have done something. But sometimes you did do all you could, and it just wasn't enough. And I guess that you kind of have to be okay with that. I think another example, this wasn't really, I don't think this was an intentional suicide, but I'm not entirely sure. The chess grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, when he died last year in October, there was a tweet from, I think, the president of FIDE in chess, who tweeted something like Daniel's friends weren't there for him enough or some shit like that. I didn't know the guy at all. I didn't really watch chess much even, but I know that that's probably not true because it almost never is. And I think that, whatever problem he had with drugs and stuff like that, I don't think it's anything that like anybody could have just, talked him out of. You know what I mean? Some people have the idea that when there's like depression or something like drug addiction even or stuff like that you can just like if their friends cared enough to just talk them out of it, they would suddenly realize the error of their ways and just realize, "Oh, I was so stupid, guys. My bad for almost killing myself." It never happens that way. It never does. And it's just, you just like sometimes you can't do anything. In fact, to kind of end this, I kind of want to bring up a point that Chester Bennington made. Again, I know a lot about. Obviously, again, he's my favorite singer. I know a lot about him. Okay, I've read about read a lot of shit. An interview he did a few months before he died. He talked about a lot of these issues. He talked about his issues with depression and how, like, how the spirals he would go down in his head. And some of the songs in the album were written about that too. But he said at the end of one of these conversations that about suicide, he said like something along the lines of, I don't know the exact quote, but like something along the lines of like, I can't even imagine doing that now because I have such great friends. And then 3 months later, he kills himself. That guy, the guy who said, I can't imagine killing myself now because I love my friends so much, he killed himself just a few months later. And there's no evidence that like his friend suddenly started hating him and that's why he did it. He just did it. He simultaneously said that and also hanged himself. And that's how it is. In those moments of depression really getting you, you forget that you said that. You forget that you thought about that. In those moments, your friends do hate you. And that you actually don't have as good of friends as you think. Or you do have such good friends, but you don't deserve them. And they actually just don't understand how much better they'd be off if you were gone. So really, I mean, sometimes you just can't tell. And I mean, yeah, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Everybody, if you have a friend with depression or is suicidal, you should do everything you can to support them and let them know that you love them. But also, don't feel like that if they do end up doing something that it was all your fault because it almost certainly wasn't. And beyond in fact a lot of depressed people don't even like, if you actually ask them, they'd say they love you and they are so appreciative of what you did, but they just think that they don't deserve you or something like that. It's almost never your fault. And that doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's literally never your fault. There are obviously situations where somebody's been driven to suicide, but like, when it comes to like feeling like you didn't help enough, unless you really know for sure that there's something you could have easily done, even then, I mean, hindsight is 2020, right? But like, unless you know for sure that there's something you could have easily done, you should have obviously known about. It's likely that you didn't have anything to do with it, or if they did think about you in their final moments, it was how much better you thought they thought you'd be. They probably, I mean, it's in those moments you don't even think about how your friends are going to be so upset and so guilty about it. They're probably thinking that none of that shit's going to happen. They're going to be like, I'm so glad that dickhead's gone, right? Literally. I mean, it sounds kind of like crass, but yeah, I mean, that's how it is in moments. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, try your best, but sometimes, things just happen. And, we don't always have to find meaning in things that we can never really understand without being in that person's head in the moment. Just, try your best, but accept the outcome, no matter what it is.